Let's dive deeper into stages of cognitive development according to Piaget. But before anything else, let me share with you First Peter 5:10, and after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. Piaget focused on how children think, reason, and understand the world. Let's start with the very first stage in Piaget's theory, which is the sensory motor stage, covering ages 0 to 2 years. At this age, babies learn entirely through their senses and their movements. They touch, taste, grab, shake, throw, you name it. This is how they make sense of the world. One of the biggest milestones in this stage is something we call object permanence. This means the child starts to understand that an object still exists even if they can't see it. For example, if you hide a toy under a blanket, a baby who has developed object permanence will actually look for it because they know it didn't just disappear. Another important development is the beginning of goal directed actions. Babies start doing things on purpose to get a result. A simple example is a baby shaking a rattle over and over again because they enjoy the sound. They discover if I do this movement, I get this sound. That's already a form of early problem solving. So, for the pre operational, at this point, kids are learning to use language quickly, but their thinking is still very centered on their own viewpoint. They're curious, expressive, and bursting with pretend play. They may not think logically yet, but they're building the foundation for future problem solving. So, in this stage, we really see creativity blooming and imagination taking center stage. On the pre-operational stage, children begin to use symbols to represent things in their world. This means they can now use words, pictures, and even objects to stand for something else. For example, a child might pick up a stick and pretend it's a magic wand. They might use a banana as a telephone. Kids in the pre-operational stage have two big thinking limits. First, egocentrism. They can't easily imagine what else or what someone else sees or feels, so they assume others think the same way they do. Second is the centration. They focus on one obvious detail and miss the bigger picture. That's why a child thinks a taller glass has more water, even if both glasses have the same amount. Then for the concrete operational, so let's talk about what children can do during the concrete operational stage, which usually happens from ages 7 to 11. At this age, children start becoming little thinkers. They can reason more logically, but their thinking is still tied to real objects and real experiences. They're not yet ready for abstract ideas. Everything needs to be hands on and concrete. One of the biggest developments here is something called conservation. This means they begin to understand that certain properties like amount, volume, number don't change even if the appearance changes. For example, if you pour water from a tall glass into a short, wide cup, kids think the amount changes. But children in the concrete operational stage already know the water is still the same. Okay, let's fast forward to the teenage brain, starting around age 11 and up. Learners enter what Piaget calls the formal operational stage. This is the point where thinking becomes much more sophisticated. Instead of relying on what they can see or touch, teenagers begin to reason in a more abstract and logical way. so they can imagine possibilities, think about what if situations, and even challenge ideas or rules just to test reasoning. This is why adolescents suddenly enjoy debating, questioning, and exploring big topics like justice, identity, and consequences. They're no longer limited to concrete examples. They can think like little scientists, forming hypotheses and examining different outcomes. In this stage, they're developing the ability to plan ahead, solve problems in a more systematic way, and understand complex concepts in math, science, and social issues. So when you see your older students arguing passionately or trying to figure out deeper meanings, that's actually their brain leveling up. So Piaget emphasized that kids don't just absorb information, they actively explore, experiment, and construct their own understanding of the world through hands on experience. Every child moves through the same four stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational, in the same order, although the age of progression may vary a bit. When Piaget talks about how children learn, he highlights two powerful processes: assimilation and accommodation. Think of them as the brain's way of making sense of the world. Assimilation happens when a child takes something new and fits it into what they already understand. For example, if a child knows what a dog is and sees a new kind of dog, they simply add to their own idea of dogs. Accommodation happens when the new experience doesn't fit their old idea. So they have to adjust their thinking. For instance, if that same child sees a cat and calls it a dog, someone corrects them, and their brain creates a new category for cats. Both processes work together, helping children constantly update and refine how they understand things. That's why cognitive development becomes richer and more accurate over time. Glory to God.